Hello, everyone. My name is Mackenzie, and today I'm going to guide you through the Student Learning Commons workshop discussing outlining and reverse outlining. Before I get started, however, I would like to take the time to acknowledge that I work, live, and play on the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam peoples, and the Student Learning Commons also operates on these ancestral lands. Now, you might be asking yourself, why bother with an outline? Many writers prefer not to work with an outline, but having an outline, even a rough one, can really help you clarify your own thinking, identify the gaps in your knowledge, thereby guiding your research, and support you in structuring your paper. Although university classes will often have you submit an outline as a separate part of your grade, it is useful to think of your outline not as a separate step in your writing process, but rather as a living document. The least effective outline is one that you write at the beginning of your process and then completely forget about. It is much more useful to have an outline that you consistently refer back to and change as you continue to do your research and develop your ideas. You can even begin to draft your paper working directly in your outline using the sections you identify in the outline as headings and subheadings in your draft. If you take this approach, it can be useful to save versions of your document. For instance, a rough outline, an outline with research notes, and a first draft version, so that you can refer back to your work instead of overwriting it. Outlines do not always have to be complicated and detailed, nor will they all look the same. Even just making notes about these pillars can help you move your thinking and writing forward. You can think of this kind of outline as a skeleton of your paper. This type of outline is most useful when you can use it not simply to identify the individual parts, but also to think about how they will fit together and build on each other. So, how do each of your paragraphs or focus areas support your overall argument as outlined in your thesis? How does your conclusion follow from the ideas you've presented in your thesis and each of your paragraphs? As you begin to make notes about these points, you are working on drafting a paper that has an effective structure and a clear, cohesive argument. Let's take a look at an example. In this example, the thesis is that students are susceptible to stress because they must manage many conflicting demands on their time. A stress management program would help students deal with these pressures and maintain better overall health. This draft thesis is helpful for me as a writer at the outline stage, because it identifies both the claim that I want to make, i.e. that students are susceptible to stress, and the reasons I have for making that claim, i.e. because they must manage many conflicting demands on their time, and the recommendation I want to make. Not all thesis statements need to make a recommendation, of course, but being able to identify something about why you would make this argument, why it matters, and or who should care about it is very helpful when it comes to writing a conclusion for your paper. After you outline your thesis, your next step will be outlining paragraph topic sentences. So you'll notice here that I haven't yet drafted my topic sentences. This is an early stage in my outline when I'm making notes for myself about what I want each paragraph to be about. In a later stage of my outlining, I can actually include topic sentences for each paragraph. This step can be helpful to ensure that my topic sentences are clear and that they relate to my overall thesis statement. If you look at the text in italics, you'll see some notes that I've made to myself as a writer. These kind of notes can also be useful to include in an outline. I like to put them in my comments in my Word document to keep them separate from the main text, just to avoid confusion. They help me to stay on track and to think not just about the content that I'm including in my paper, but why I'm including it and how it will help me to make the connections between my ideas clear for my reader. Now we can move on to the conclusion. As I mentioned earlier, this is the part of your paper where you need to reflect not just on the argument you've made, but also why you've made this argument. Sometimes this is known as addressing the so what question for your reader. Imagine that a reader looks at your thesis and says, okay, so students are stressed, so what? Your conclusion is where you want to be able to address that reader directly and say, here's why we should address student stress, and if you have any recommendations, here is how we might do it. If you've already made recommendations in your paper, as I have in my example, You can also say, here's why my recommendations will be effective. If the very basic outline we discussed earlier is the skeleton of your paper, this is the stage where you start to add content beyond just the bones. Start to add in point form notes that support each of your topic sentences. If you include quotations or notes about references, it's a really good idea to also include the citation information for your source so you don't get lost along the way. This is another place where I often find the comment function helpful to keep the full citation information, including the page number, without having to list it all in the body of my outline, because that just looks messy. As we've seen, there are actually many stages to outlining, and you can progress through each one as you draft your paper. At the very beginning of your process, your outline may just be some point form notes about ideas and questions you may have. Even these notes can help you stay focused as you identify themes and work on clarifying your focus and argument for your paper. As you continue to do your research and your thinking, your outline can progress from these point form notes into a more ordered list that shows connections between your ideas, all the way until you have a clear thesis statement and full sentences with notes about how each focus area relates to the others, to the overall thesis, and to your conclusion. Once you have a clear outline, writing your paper really becomes an exercise in filling in the blanks. A well-developed outlining process therefore serves the very important purpose of helping you to break the work of writing down into stages. When you're outlining, you're working on the stage of developing and clarifying your ideas, your reason for writing. Then, when you're drafting, you can focus on putting these ideas into words in the clearest and most effective way for your reader. Since outlining is about clarifying your ideas, when you're working on your outline, here are three major things to work on. First, clarifying your overall argument and your answer to the so what question is very important to show why your argument matters. Second, ensuring that the argument you present in your thesis statement is clearly connected and supported by the rest of your paper will help you ensure that your argumentative thread is clear and coherent throughout your paper. And third, you want to make sure that your ideas are organized in a way that readers can follow from beginning to the end of your paper. Remember that when you're drafting, you can also add what are known as meta-textual comments to help guide your reader. These are sentences that do not relate to the content of your paper per se, but help to orient your reader. For example, I could say, before we can focus on the demands on students' time, we need to first understand what stress is. Or I could say, a brief history of this issue will help to provide context for the rest of my argument. This sets up what you're going to say later in your paper and helps guide your reader through this. Ideas often shift when we are writing, thanks to the awesome aha moments that we hopefully have, where we make connections while writing that we weren't anticipating. That's why we need to review and revise even the best outline papers. Both outlines and reverse outlines can serve us. With that thought in mind, you might be wondering what a reverse outline is. Reverse outlining is about taking the time to review the structure of our paper after we've written a draft. Often when we review and revise papers, we focus on the sentence level and ask ourselves questions like, is this sentence too wordy? Or even zoom in further and ask things like, is this word spelled correctly? When we make a reverse outline, we're looking at how clearly our argument is presented in the beginning of our paper and how well the rest of our paper supports and advances that argument, moving us towards the conclusion we make. I often think about it as seeing the whole instead of just seeing the parts. While there are a few suggestions for how you can make a reverse outline on the slide, my favorite way to do it is to copy and paste my thesis statement into a new blank document, and then copy and paste the first and last sentence of each paragraph. If I notice that the first sentence of one paragraph isn't my topic sentence, I'll usually go back and copy my topic sentence as well. And then I read through these individual sentences to see if I can follow the shape of the paper. Even in this point form version, my ideas should clearly relate to and build upon each other. If not, I can go back to the draft and see how I might reorganize content, clarify connections, or even add transitions or bridging paragraphs that might be missing. Here are three big things to look out for when you're making a reverse outline. First, Make sure each topic sentence conveys one important idea. Second, ensure that each concluding sentence conveys a sense of why this idea matters. And third, make sure that each paragraph relates to your main argument or thesis in some way. Now, this marks the end of our workshop for today, but that doesn't mean the Student Learning Commons can't still support you. At the SLC, we offer all sorts of services and you're paying for these in your tuition, so you might as well take advantage of them. We can help you with every part of your paper, from planning and outlining, to writing the thesis statement, to integrating sources, to revision and proofreading. And trust me, we love doing it. There are also services at the library that can help you with finding sources, narrowing down your search, and using the correct citation style appropriately. So please do check out what the library has to offer. So with that, I will leave you. Thank you once again for viewing this workshop, and we hope to see you at the SLC soon.